Jimmy Traina is a Sports Illustrated icon. His Rolodex is bigger than the Yellow Pages, and he does a lot of great work currently with SI from Train of Thoughts, his Sports Illustrated Media podcast. He has been with SI since 2000 and has interviewed the greatest names in sports media and in sports in general. I'm Bryan Fenley. I'm an anchor at Fox Sports Radio, and this is going to be an opportunity to showcase Jimmy, his career, and what he's done, and some of the stories that have come from it. First of all, Jimmy, first, thank you so much for doing this. And did you feel like you were big time when The Rock followed you? Was that the moment for you?
Um, no, I didn't feel like big time. I was. It was just stunning more than anything. It was one of those Twitter things. It wasn't. We don't text. We don't have each other's numbers. We didn't become friends. And I haven't interviewed him yet. If I can interview him, then maybe that would make me feel big time. But we have still not done an interview.
If you were, and maybe you have already, but if you were to interview Howard Stern, how starstruck would you be?
It's funny. I don't want to use the word interview, but I got to ask him like two or three questions when they had the Super Bowl here in New York in I think it was 2013. Um, and I got lucky enough to go to they had the 60th birthday party during Super Bowl weekend. It was a crazy weekend here in New York. And I got to ask him two or three questions as he was walking in on the red carpet. And he's a pretty intimidating guy because he's big, he's got the hair, and you just know he's going to give it back to you. I think even if whoever tries to interview Howard, he's going to try to control the interview,
Ah.
which is a very tough thing when you're trying to do the interview. So it would definitely be a challenge. But listen, I'd love to talk to him. I think I'm an old school fan, and I think his battles that he had with the FCC and that whole thing when he was on terrestrial and trying to make sort of an R-rated or X-rated show work on terrestrial radio and fighting with management. I think that's all fascinating stuff, and I sort of miss that during his Sirius days because it's been pretty kumbaya, with him at Sirius.
Larry David, what does that man mean to you?
It's it's weird because I don't think when I started watching Curb, I don't remember at the time because I mean that show is 20 years old now when it first started. I don't know if I made the connection that this was the guy who was responsible for Seinfeld. You have to, when that show came on the air 20 years ago, there was no Twitter and the internet was around, but like you didn't follow things the way you do now where you sort of know every little detail. So I don't know, when you think about the fact that he's responsible for Seinfeld and then he does Curb, which to me is basically like an R-rated Seinfeld. Um, you know, I love what I love about those two shows is, and I've always said this, and I've said this a million times, the first 3, 4 seasons of each of those shows are the greatest things ever because it was before they get over the top and they focus in the early years on just the day-to-day minutia that we all go through and things that are in our I think of that famous Seinfeld episode when they go to the dinner party and George wants to bring Pepsi and ringdings and Elaine is basically saying we're adults, we need to bring wine and cake. And I'm with George on that. I'd rather have Pepsi and ringdings than wine and cake. So the fact that that stuff was all brought to the forefront, debating whether you should park in a handicap spot, I would never do that now. But like, when you're a kid, you're 18, 19, you don't realize that that's not really the right thing to do. And just that, losing your car in a parking lot, which was a famous Seinfeld episode. And then Curb was just, an extension of that, the stop and chat. When you see someone on the street, you don't want to chat with them, or the chat and cut when someone cuts you in line while you're waiting for food. Um, you know, there's an episode which really is so relevant today, where Larry's forced to apologize, but he says he's going to apologize, but he's not going to mean it, and that's how we all feel. So I love all of the real life day to day minutia stuff that those two shows explored.
When you think about your work and you construct your own way of comedy, how would you describe it?
I mean, what I've always done, the daily column is different than the podcast. The column is, a lot of people now know me for the podcast because I have good guests and, we do, I think, good interviews. But the column has always, I used to do hot clicks and now it's train of thought. That's always been my baby. That's always been sort of the first love. I created hot clicks. And the goal was always very simple when I started that in 2007 and doing train of thoughts today. The goal is very simple. Just entertain, give people like 5 minutes of entertainment during their day. That's it. I mean, you don't have to think I'm funny. I don't think I'm funny, but if I can provide you with the Twitter video, the YouTube video, the highlight, the stat, anything where you get some entertainment out of that, that's really just my goal.
Steve Austin, when you interviewed him and his revelations about Manny Petties, how did that strike you?
Well, that was, that's, from if you want to get like into the weeds on interviewing, that to me was a great interview for one simple reason, and I got very lucky that he came in studio to do that interview. When you're on the phone with someone if you're on the phone with someone you can do a good interview. If you're on the phone with someone you don't know, I had never spoken to him before. I had no relationship with him. So if you're on the phone, the first like 15, 20 minutes is really like a feel out. And it's, is this guy a jerk? Is this guy trying to get me to, but when you're in person, the context is so different and you can have more of a conversation. And I don't know if that revelation comes about if, we're doing it on the phone, but we're sitting there and, he could see I have a smile on my face when I ask him and he's sort of laughing and, we had a good laugh about it. So, he's had an interesting post WWE career. He became this unbelievable podcaster and great interviewer and has sort of, changed his career. So the revelation wasn't shocking. He gets it. He knew how to have fun with it. So it was good. It was good stuff.
Jimmy Traina is with us. He's with SI. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy, one of the interviews that you did over the phone was with Steve Carell. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, and you called that the highlight of 2019. What is the highlight for you in 2021 so far?
Let's see, 2021. Getting vaccinated is the highlight.
Yes.
Talking about in terms of the podcast, it's so weird because I write every day. Like everything runs together. It's so hard for me
Sure.
to. But let's see, highlight of 2021. I mean, I will say this: I can't get one off the top of my head right now, but I will say, well, that's not true. I did one around the Super Bowl. Super Bowl week, I did a roundtable with Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football, who I love, and Aaron Andrews, who I've known for a while. And we did it together. It wasn't separate interviews. It was a three-way roundtable. And that was a really fun, light, entertaining podcast that I really enjoyed doing. But I've had a really good run of guests here recently. Doris Burke is on this week. Ryan Russillo was on a couple of weeks ago. Brian Baumgartner from The Office was on a few weeks ago. Rich Eisen was on a few, So I like when I'm on a consistent run with guests. That makes me happy more than like a one-off. I can't say I've had that Steve Carell moment yet this year, but there may be something coming maybe in September.
Ooh, little tease.
Yeah, can't say anything yet.
Well, I one of your recent interviews that I listened to with Peter Traeger, I thought was fascinating. I encourage everybody to check that one out. And it was funny because he was sort of ribbing you about how you reached out to Tom Brady. Have you gotten any response since from
No.
him?
And as I said to Peter, it was really a joke. And I said to Peter, he sort of disagreed, but there was no chance Tom Brady would even see that tweet, let alone
Sure.
respond. So I wasn't really. Listen, if he would have seen it, that would have been shocking enough. There was no way I was getting a response. So, yeah, but that was, people on Twitter, God forbid you try to joke around. People get all hot and bothered.
What's the funniest troll job you've ever gotten on Twitter?
Like to myself?
Yeah, it's yourself.
Oh God. That's a good question. I'm trying to think if I ever been trolled. You don't really get, what's weird about Twitter, and I don't want to say it like I think this is funny because it kind of does get annoying, but like when you reveal that you like something, people love, like you mentioned Howard Stern. If I tweet about Howard Stern, I get like 50 responses right away from people. He sucks. He's over. He's done. He's overrated. The show sucks. Like I don't understand the point. Like I get it when I tweet about the Yankees. I'm a Yankee
Yeah.
fan. But like, okay, sports fans are idiots, so they want to write back and say the Yankees suck. That's fine. But it's weird, even like if I tweet about a broadcaster I like, right away it's like, oh, he's terrible. If you tweet about a show you like, oh, that show's like that to me is I'd rather get trolled than have that. Like that, I don't get the here's something I like, and then people come back to tell you that they hate it. I don't understand that. But so the troll though, if it's funny, I would enjoy it. I don't know if I've ever been like directly
Knock
trolled.
on wood. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You you're very well liked when it comes to interviews, so no trolling there. And what do you think it is about your demeanor and the comfort that you bring to your interviewee in that setting that makes them want to come on and talk? High profile people, what is it about the way that you run the interviews that is so appealing to big names in sports?
I mean, listen, that's a question for them more than me. I think, I don't try to do like question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. I try to make it a conversations. I don't know if that is appealing to people. And, I try not to just talk about sports with people. Um, so maybe that, when you mentioned the interview, the podcast with Peter Schrager from a couple of weeks ago, we were doing power rankings of, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. So I think people know that, maybe there could be some fun stuff. Some people don't want that though. So I mean, I've done interviews where people come on and they just want to talk about, their career and the sport they cover, and that's it. And that's boring for me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer that. But I do think, I try not to I try to keep it a little light and a little fun, which I think people, I guess, appreciate.
I'm going to step outside the sports boundary for this question. What would we learn about Jimmy Traina when seeing how he took on that Bon Jovi concert about a decade ago?
Oh, I've taken on a lot of Bon Jovi concerts. I mean, I've seen them more than that. There's a perfect example. You say you like if you say Bon Jovi is your favorite band on Twitter, forget it. You're gonna get. um, I don't know. I just listen, and here's what's weird too. Like people, when you say you like Bon Jovi, okay, I like the music. That's what I'm into. I grew up in the '80s. I love all that '80s hair band stuff, cheesy '80s music. That's my favorite music. Um, what I like about going to a Bon Jovi concert is they usually play all the hits. They're not, I mean, they'll do the stuff off the new album, which whatever, everyone hates that. But, they play the hits. It's a good time. It's good music. Um, so, I mean, I think I'll Be There For You is probably my all time favorite song. If you've not gone to a Bon Jovi concert and experienced Living on a Prayer live when the roof is about to come off the arena, that's, great, great moment. So it's fun.
If I were to hear you sing Living in a Prayer with karaoke, I know you're a devout karaoke singer, so I would love to know, are you hitting the notes?
No, no,
And
no.
if so, what is that like?
I have never hit one note. I have the worst voice. I'm tone deaf. I got kicked out of chorus in high school, I think, because my voice is terrible. Um, so I try to perform more than sing because I cannot sing. So
Wow.
that's the way it
So
goes.
what is if you were to look back at your career, and Jimmy Traina is with us, I'm Bryan Fenley, the one obstacle that you overcame that you're most proud about yourself and how you dealt with it?
Well, I made this huge mistake and left Sports Illustrated in 2013 after being there for 13 years. And I went to foxsports.com. Ended up getting laid off from there when they had some massive cuts in 2016. And then was very, very lucky enough to get back to Sports Illustrated in 2017. And when I went back, I sort of had to reinvent myself a little bit because times had changed so much. When I was doing hot clicks. So I just started covering media more, um, toned down some of the more politically incorrect stuff we used to do back in the day when it was acceptable. Now it's not. And, you know, and then still try to maintain and draw an audience. That's, which every day gets harder to do because everything is siphoned off so much with so many websites and social media and podcasts and streaming and video and this and that shows. It's very hard to if you're starting now, I don't know how you do it. I feel bad for people starting now because the audience is so fractured. I mean, I got so lucky when I started Hot Clicks in 2007. There was no Twitter around. People used to come to Hot Clicks to get news, which was insane to me when I realized that at the time. And then Twitter really changed the game in terms of everything for media.
Well, you've got thousands upon thousands of Twitter followers, so obviously they are digging what you are putting out. We're joined by SI's Jimmy Traina. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. If there were no cameras and you were having a sit down conversation with Chris Russo,
Mhm.
what are we going to hear?
Well, I know what you're going to hear from whatever you're going to hear from him is what you'd hear on the radio because I've had conversations with him off the air. There's no difference. There's
Wow.
no difference. That's how he is. He'll say things he might not say on the radio, but that personality is not on the radio on that he does on Sirius is not an act in any way, shape, or form. I mean, he came to the building, the SI building, to do the pod once. He gets off the elevator. Hey, Jimmy. Hey, baby. How you doing? Like it's he's always in that zone. So I listen. We're not close. What I'd love to get into him off air about is maybe some stories he has about other people in the media. We
Yeah.
haven't gotten into that, but because he's definitely has a lot of stories. But he's a guy. He wants to talk about sports. Like that's what he wants to talk about. So off air conversations usually would revolve around that in some way. But yeah, he's completely authentic.
Two more quick questions for you, Jimmy. As far as conversations that have been on air, that have been surprising and eye-popping for you, what is a sit down with an interview or with an athlete or with a sports media star where he or she said something and it still sits with you today? It is really present in your memory.
Hmm. Um, I had Scott Van Pelt on a podcast. It may have been, it was probably in the beginning of the Trump regime, and there was a lot of backlash against ESPN at that time, and ESPN is liberal bias, this and that, and he came out and he was just like, I'm sick of it. It's bullshit, and I was surprised he was as strong
Oh,
in his
interesting.
comments about it. So that was I was just a little surprised he'd be so dead on in doing that. And then I'm trying to think in terms of something. I mean, listen, I remember interviewing. You brought up at the beginning about Brady. I interviewed Brady in person once. That's what I said in the tweet. It
Mhm.
wasn't on a podcast. It was it was at an event I think for Under Armour, and I interviewed him in person for like a written Q&A. And again, this is a long time. This was probably in 2008. So things were different then. And I remember asking him, which I can't believe I did, but at the time there were rumors Giselle was pregnant. And I asked him if he could confirm or deny. And he looked at me, he smiled, and he said, all I can tell you is I'm having fun trying. And I was shocked that Tom Brady, that one was probably the most shocking comment that, because it's Tom Brady. You don't expect him to, do that. But that was a fun one.
I feel like Tom has shown that personality more now being in Tampa. Like we've been desiring to see him outside of that sturdy, just reserved self. And now we're starting to get a taste of that. My final question for you, Jimmy. What's the one question that you've wanted to be asked that nobody ever has?
That is a great question. What is the one question I wanted to be asked?
About your career, about your
Yeah,
life,
yeah.
about
I'm
something you've
trying to,
done?
yeah. Um, hmm. You know, see what I don't. Oh, I don't want to come off as a complainer. I wish people would ask about the grind of having to write an original column 5 days a week. I think people think because it's sports, listen, if you write about sports, and especially what I write about, I'm not writing about hardcore sports. I'm writing about the lighter side of sports and I get fun. You're not allowed to ever complain about your job. And I get that. But when you have to write 5 days a week and, and you have to do it during a pandemic when there were no sports for 3 months and you still do it and manage to somehow get some traffic, it's a challenge. It's a real, there are days where I just don't have anything to say. But I guess that's really abnormal for sports people because sports people seem to have something to say about everything. And there's just days where I'm just like, yeah, I don't know what to say about that game. So, um, I would like more questions about what it's like to write every single day, so then I can vent and complain about it.
Well, when your next book comes out, I'm sure you will give ample time to that, or you will be injecting what you'll tell people, look, I got through that tough time last year where there was no sports because I was able to inject hilarity and because I had a breadth of sports history that I was able to.
Well, and I'm very lucky that SI lets me, listen, especially back then, if I wanted to do something that had nothing to do with sports, I'm able to do it every now and again. So that helps.
The very talented, the very versatile Jimmy Traina of SI. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Jimmy, this was a really fun conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Same. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.